She said I lacked executive presence. I had enough presence to brief the Joint Chiefs on hypersonic threats last Tuesday. The words hung in the air of my sister's meticulously designed open-concept living room, mingling with the scent of lemon polish and overpriced Chardonnay. Brenda delivered the verdict with the casual cruelty of a surgeon diagnosing a terminal but uninteresting condition. Her audience, a curated collection of her husband's business partners and her own thought leader acolytes, nodded in sympathetic understanding. They looked at me, Patricia Hartwell, 49 years old, in my simple navy blue dress and sensible shoes, and saw exactly what Brenda wanted them to see: a failure, a ghost, a woman who had peaked in high school and spent the subsequent decades fading into the beige walls of a government cubicle. "It's not a criticism, Patty, it's an observation," she continued, her voice radiating a theatrical pity that set my teeth on edge. "In my world, in the real world of influence and impact, presence is everything. It's how you walk into a room, it's your brand, you hide." I didn't respond. I simply took a sip of my club soda, the ice cubes clinking softly against the glass. It was the only sound I contributed to the conversation. My silence was, as always, misinterpreted. They saw it as acquiescence, as shame. They couldn't possibly understand that silence was the most important discipline I had ever mastered. It was the armor I wore, the weapon I wielded, the sacred space where the real work was done. While Brenda was building her brand, I was building threat models that kept brands like hers from being vaporized in a flash of light and a mushroom cloud. The tightness in my chest was a familiar companion at these family gatherings. It wasn't sadness, not anymore. It was a low-frequency hum of frustration, the friction of two worlds colliding. My world was one of classified documents, of windowless rooms where the fate of nations was weighed in grams of risk. Her world was this: a stage for performing success, where the currency was likes and shares, and the gravest threat was a negative comment on her latest LinkedIn article. My gaze drifted past Brenda's perfectly coiffed head to the large picture window overlooking her manicured lawn. The grass was an almost unnatural shade of green, each blade standing at attention. A perfect, sterile battlefield. I preferred the honest grit of sand, the metallic tang of recycled air in a pressurized cabin, the low thrum of a server farm processing incomprehensible amounts of data. I preferred reality. This dynamic, this chasm between us, wasn't new. It was foundational, laid down decades ago in the finished basement of our childhood home. Our father, a man forged in the steel mills of Pennsylvania, was celebrating his retirement. He was a shift foreman, a man of few words but immense physical presence. The basement was crowded with men like him, men with calloused hands, honest laughs, and a deep-seated loyalty to their families and their country. They drank beer from bottles and told stories that didn't require embellishment. Brenda, even then at 17, was the star. She just won a state debating championship and secured a full scholarship to a prestigious liberal arts college. She moved through the room with an unearned confidence, her voice a bright, sharp instrument cutting through the low rumble of male conversation. She talked about her future, her ambitions, her theories on everything from economics to art. The men, our father's friends, were charmed and a little baffled by her. They saw her as a rocket, destined for a different sky. I was 15, tucked into a corner, reading a book on cryptography I'd checked out of the town library. I was quiet. I listened. I observed the subtle shifts in hierarchy, the way men deferred to my father, not just because it was his party, but because he had earned their respect over 40 years of sweat and integrity. I saw the alliances and the old rivalries playing out in a shared glance or a clap on the back that was just a little too hard. My father found me later, after most of the guests had gone. He sat beside me on the worn plaid sofa, the smell of steel and Old Spice clinging to his work shirt. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Brenda, she's the talker," he said, his voice thick with pride. He looked over at where she was holding court with our uncles, captivating them. "She's going to be someone important, you can just tell." He then looked back at me, at the book in my lap. His expression softened into something more complex, a mixture of love and confusion. "You, Patty, well, you're a good listener. You've always been the quiet one." He didn't mean it as a slight. To him, it was a simple statement of fact. Brenda was the sword, bright and visible, made for the parade ground. I was the secret, the thing you kept hidden, the quiet mechanism that made the sword effective. He just didn't know it. He saw one daughter destined for the stage and another for the audience. The thought that the quiet one might be operating in a theater of unimaginable consequence was beyond the scope of his world. That night, a label was forged. Brenda the speaker, Patricia the listener, Brenda the performer, Patricia the observer. For the next 30 years, our family and Brenda herself never saw a reason to question it. The years that followed only seemed to confirm their assessment. Brenda graduated with honors, got a Master of Business Administration from a place that advertised in airline magazines, and married Robert, a man whose ambition was matched only by his vapidness. She climbed the corporate ladder, rebranding herself every few years, from marketing guru to innovation consultant, and now to a thought leader and executive coach. Her life was a meticulously curated feed of success. Every promotion was announced, every vacation documented, every mundane thought packaged as profound insight and broadcast to her thousands of followers. Her life was a performance, and she never broke character. My path was quieter, less legible to them. I went to a state university, majored in mathematics and international relations. I didn't join a sorority. I joined a wargaming club. My postgraduate work was at a university known for its deep ties to the intelligence community, not for its football team. When I was recruited, the job title on the paperwork they allowed me to show my family was Policy Analyst, Department of Defense. It sounded dreadfully, intentionally boring. "A bureaucrat," Brenda had declared at a Christmas dinner. My sister, the bureaucrat, hiding away in a cubicle, pushing paper for the government. I let her believe it. It was easier. It was also a requirement. How could I explain that my paperwork was a predictive model on Chinese naval movements in the South China Sea? How could I tell her that my cubicle was often a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, where the walls were shielded to prevent eavesdropping and the air tasted of pure, filtered oxygen and high-stakes tension? How could I describe the feeling of briefing a 4-star general who had more combat experience than she had hot dinners, and watching him nod, taking my analysis as gospel? The silence doctrine wasn't just a professional necessity, it became a personal philosophy. Defending myself was a futile exercise. To explain my life would be to betray my oath. To even hint at its true nature would sound like a desperate, pathetic lie to a family that had already cast me in the role of the quiet failure. So I stayed silent. I let them believe I was the disappointing one, the spinster aunt with a boring, stable job and no ambition. My life was redacted. Theirs was a press release. The irony was a bitter taste I had long grown accustomed to. Back at the party, Brenda was now dissecting the perceived failures of my life for a new guest, a woman with a severe haircut and a name tag that read Synergy Solutions. "She still has a flip phone," Brenda said, gesturing toward me with her wine glass. "Can you imagine, in this day and age, it's like she's actively choosing to be irrelevant." I glanced down at the simple, rugged phone in my small purse. It was a museum piece to them. To me, it was a tool, It couldn't be hacked easily. It didn't track my location. It didn't have a high-resolution camera or microphone that could be activated remotely. It made calls. It received texts. It was secure. My real work was done on closed systems, on devices that would never see the light of day outside a secure facility. My flip phone wasn't a sign of irrelevance. It was a sign of discipline. It was a totem of a world they couldn't even begin to imagine. Robert, my brother-in-law, sidled up to me, a smug look on his face. "Brenda tells me you're still analyzing policies," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Still in the same department?" "Something like that," I replied, my voice even. "You know, Brenda's keynote at the Global Leadership Summit got over 50,000 views on YouTube," he boasted, puffing out his chest. "She's making a real impact, changing the conversation. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Making your mark." I thought about the conversation I had been a part of just last week. It was in the Pentagon's deepest, most secure briefing room, known colloquially as the tank. The topic was the destabilizing effect of a new Russian submarine class. The mark we were trying to avoid was a thermonuclear exchange. The conversation hadn't been uploaded to YouTube. "I'm sure she's very proud," I said. The ambiguity was a small, private pleasure. The evening wore on, a slow-motion assault of small talk and passive aggression. Brenda, fueled by another glass of Chardonnay and the rapt attention of her audience, decided it was time for the final public execution. She clapped her hands together, a sharp theatrical sound that drew all eyes. "Okay, everyone, I want to toast my little sister, Patty," she announced. The term little sister was a deliberate choice, a reminder of a hierarchy that only existed in her mind. I was 2 years younger, but in that moment, she made me feel like a child. "We don't get to see her often because she's so busy with her work," she said, pausing to let the insinuation land. "And while I've been out here building a business, creating a platform, trying to make a difference, Patty has chosen a different path, a quieter path." The air was thick with pity. I could feel the collective gaze of the room on me. They saw a woman who had failed to launch. "It takes a certain kind of person to be content with being a cog in a machine," she went on, her voice now a well-practiced symphony of false compassion, "to find fulfillment in obscurity. No impact, no legacy, just a steady government paycheck. So I want to toast Patricia for her service, whatever it is." The room was silent for a beat, the insult hanging there, naked and brutal. Then a few of her friends raised their glasses in a half-hearted, awkward gesture. My chest felt like it was encased in ice. The clinical detachment I usually maintained was beginning to crack. For the first time in years, the metallic taste in my mouth wasn't from the memory of a briefing, but from the sharp, coppery tang of pure rage. I did not move. I did not speak. I held her gaze across the room. My stillness seemed to infuriate her more than any protest could have. She saw my silence as proof of her victory. That was when the headlights swept across the living room. 2 powerful beams cut through the twilight, illuminating the perfect lawn and the faces of the stunned party guests. A vehicle had pulled into Brenda's circular driveway, its engine a low, powerful rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. It was a black Chevrolet Suburban, immaculate with tinted windows and U.S. government plates. It had an aura of compressed power, of absolute non-negotiable purpose. It was not an Uber. The party chatter died instantly, all eyes turned to the window. The driver's side door opened and a man stepped out. He was young, impossibly fit, and wearing the dress blue uniform of the United States Marine Corps. He moved with an economy of motion that was mesmerizing. He didn't look at the house or the party. His head was on a constant, subtle swivel, his eyes scanning the street, the trees, the roofline. He was a sentinel, and his presence transformed my sister's suburban paradise into a potential threat zone. He walked to the rear passenger door and opened it, standing at a perfect parade rest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a man emerged from the Suburban. He was in his late 60s with gray hair, a face etched with the lines of sleepless nights and grave decisions, and he wore a simple dark suit. But there was nothing simple about him. The weight of his office seemed to cling to him like a physical cloak. A collective gasp went through the room. Brenda's husband, Robert, made a small choking sound. It was William Mitchell, the United States Secretary of Defense. I had seen him on television a dozen times, but in person, his presence was a physical force. He was the kind of man Brenda could only dream of having on her podcast. He ignored the stunned crowd on the patio. He ignored the open front door. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the faces visible through the picture window and found me. He moved with purpose, walking straight toward the front door, the Marine falling into step a respectful 2 paces behind him. Brenda, her face a mask of confusion, moved to intercept him at the door. "Mr. Secretary," she began, her voice suddenly high and uncertain. "I'm Brenda Foster. I don't believe we've—" Secretary Mitchell walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture. He didn't mean to be rude. She was simply not the mission objective. His eyes were locked on me. He stopped a few feet away, the entire party frozen in a tableau of disbelief. The Marine stood just inside the doorway, a silent, formidable statue. "Dr. Hartwell," the secretary said. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded the absolute attention of everyone in the room. The use of the formal title, Doctor, was the first sonic boom that shattered Brenda's reality. I had a doctorate in strategic studies. I'd never mentioned it. It had never seemed relevant. I simply nodded. "Mr. Secretary." "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, his tone formal, but with an undercurrent of urgency. POTUS moved up the Taiwan brief. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. POTUS, the acronym, landed like a grenade. "We need your models. Tonight," he stated. It was not a request. My mind had already shifted. The party, my sister, the years of quiet humiliation, it all receded, becoming a distant, unimportant memory. My brain was already spooling up, accessing threat matrices, running probability vectors. The game was afoot. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet, flipping it open. I bypassed the credit cards and the driver's license, pulling out a laminated card with a dizzying array of holograms and a small microchip. My common access card, my real identification. "I'll need the SCIF at Langley," I said, my voice clear and steady. The jargon was deliberate. It was a wall, a boundary. "This is my world. You are not cleared for it." I looked at Brenda. Her jaw was slack, her face pale, with a cocktail of emotions I couldn't begin to decipher. Shock, confusion, and something that looked terrifyingly like dawning comprehension. The woman she had just toasted as an obscure, irrelevant cog was being personally summoned by the Secretary of Defense for a briefing with the President of the United States. The universe she had so carefully constructed, with herself at the center, had just been torn apart. Secretary Mitchell gave a curt nod. "It's been prepared for you. General Miller is already en route." He then glanced at the Marine. The Marine understood. The secretary stepped aside, clearing a path to the door. "Your car's waiting, ma'am," he said. That one word, ma'am, was the final, devastating blow. It was a term of respect, deference. In that single syllable, he conferred upon me a status, a level of authority that Brenda, with all her networking and brand building, could never hope to achieve. I walked toward the door. As I passed Brenda, I saw the reflection of the room in her wide, unblinking eyes. I saw the stunned faces of her friends. I saw her husband, Robert, looking at me as if for the first time. And I saw her, the thought leader, the influencer, the woman with all the executive presence rendered utterly and completely silent. The Marine held the door of the Suburban for me. As I slid onto the cool leather seat, I didn't look back. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, sealing me in a world of quiet purpose. The vehicle pulled away smoothly, its powerful engine barely a whisper. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of leather and clean electronics. It was a mobile command center, a bubble of resolute calm. Secretary Mitchell sat opposite me. "My apologies again for the dramatic entrance, Patricia," he said, his voice losing some of its formal edge. "The situation is fluid. Things are escalating faster than the models predicted." "Whose models?" I asked, my mind already working. "Cassidy's group at the NSA," he said with a sigh. "Too optimistic. Too reliant on clean data. I told the president we needed your analysis. You're the only one who properly weights the human element. The irrationality." I nodded, looking out the window as we left Brenda's perfect, orderly neighborhood behind. The manicured lawns and identical houses gave way to the anonymous concrete and asphalt of the highway. I felt no triumph, no sense of victory. There was only a quiet, profound sense of finality. The chasm between my sister and me was no longer a secret I had to carry alone. It had been laid bare for all to see. Brenda had spent her life trying to build a legacy out of words and images, a legacy that required constant maintenance, constant performance. My legacy, if I had one, would be written in the silent, invisible ink of crises averted, of wars that never happened. It would be found in the footnotes of classified histories, a legacy of silence. She had accused me of lacking presence. She thought presence was about volume, about visibility, about commanding a room with a loud voice and a clever turn of phrase. She was wrong. True presence wasn't about being the loudest person in the room. It was about being the person the most powerful man in the world needed in the room when everything was on the line. It was about having the knowledge, the discipline, and the courage to speak quietly in the face of chaos and to have your words carry the weight of the world. The Suburban sped through the night, a dark, silent arrow aimed at the heart of American intelligence. My flip phone remained in my purse, inert and unassuming. My mind, however, was fully engaged, running simulations, preparing for the brief. The petty dramas of my sister's living room were gone, replaced by the grand, terrible chessboard of global strategy. Brenda managed her brand. I managed the consequences. We were never in the same business.